We can stop this madness, America. You must come back to us. You need us. You don't know what I need.
How did we end up here? Let's go back to the 1750s near the Ohio River to help us find out. The land near the Ohio River was rich in valuable resources, and control over this territory would give access to a very profitable fur trading industry with local Native American tribes. The two main competitors over this territory were the British and the French. So needless to say, the tensions between British and French would intensify. They both really wanted to expand westward, but they were holding each other back. Thus, the French and Indian War began. The British also passed the Declaration of 1763 in order to prevent any other French-Indian wars from happening. The colonists wanted to move west, but Britain did not want them to. This declaration sprung from Britain not wanting to get involved in another French and Indian war. So they opted to restrain colonial territory, so they had less to defend and thus was cheaper to protect. The British won the 7-Year War, and the British Crown thought it would be a good idea to end the salutary neglect that had been practiced on the American colonies since the beginning of their American occupation. They imposed taxes such as the Sugar Act, Stamp Act, the Quartering Act of 1765, the Townshend Acts, the Tea Act, and the Intolerable Acts. British used the term virtual representation to justify the taxation of the colonies, claiming that parliamentary representation was based on economic classes, not location. The colonists were not very fond of this take. They were furious at being taxed without having any representation in the parliament and felt it was wrong for British to impose taxes on them to gain revenue. Thus, the phrase, taxation without representation, was created. The inevitability of war grew greater with each of these occurrences, with the colonists being pushed further to rebellion congruently. However, among all these disputes, the most important of them all is the Boston Massacre, because it was the first publicized act of violence done by the British. The Boston Massacre started with a group of colonists supposedly throwing rocks at a lone British soldier, and it ended with 5 dead colonists. Another significant event that occurred is the Boston Tea Party. On the evening of December 16, 1773, a group of men dressed as Native Americans boarded ships filled with crates of tea. That night, they were to throw 342 crates of tea, equivalent to $1.7 million in today's money. Both of these conflicts energized anti-British sentiment and paved the way for the American Revolution. Later, in 1776, someone by the name of Thomas Paine finally invented common sense. This pamphlet spread throughout the colonies like wildfire and preached against British rule over the colonies. It claimed that taxation without representation and the Intolerable Acts were tyrannical and marked the beginning of a widespread push for patriotism in the colonies. And so, the battles ensued. The first and possibly most famous battle was called the Battle of Lexington and Concord. This battle is where the phrase, "the shot heard round the world," came from. Here is a beautiful poem that summarizes this battle perfectly. By the rude bridge that arched the flood, the flag to April's breeze unfurled. Here once the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard round the world. The foe, long since in silence slept, alike the conqueror silent sleeps. In time the ruined bridge has swept down the dark stream which seaward creeps. On this green bank, by this soft stream, we set today a votive stone, that memory may their deed redeem, when, like our sires, our sons are gone. Spirit that made those heroes dare to die and leave their children free, bid time and nature gently spare that shaft we raised to them and thee. Coming off the heels of Lexington and Concord, George Washington was appointed as the colonial commander-in-chief. Shortly after, the British began to surround Boston. This led to the Battle of Bunker Hill. The colonists attempted to delay an attack on Boston, but instead provoked the British to attack sooner. The battle was ironically not fought on Bunker Hill, but instead on Breed's Hill as a colonial loss. Despite the loss, The colonists' morale was boosted drastically by this battle, and the British suffered significant losses. After several more battles, arguably the most important document to the US was created. On July 4th, 1776, 56 men signed the Declaration of Independence. This document can be viewed as a declaration of war to an extent, and was also full of Enlightenment ideas, such as inalienable natural rights and the social contract. This was the biggest step towards the revolution and independence yet. After 7 more battles, one of the most significant battles in the war happened. On September 17th, 1777, the battles of Saratoga began. The battles of Saratoga were 2 battles that were fought over a fortnight. The first battle was lost by the colonies, but they recovered during the second battle and defeated the British. Its significance is primarily due to the considerable turning point for the colonies during the war, as the victory motivated the French, Spanish, and Dutch to join the war on the colonies' side. Finally, on October 17, 1781, George Washington led the colonists in a last push at the Battle of Yorktown. This ended the revolution and secured colonial victory. This battle was a decisive victory over the British Army, despite the many disadvantages the colonies faced. As a result, the US and British leaders began negotiations, and the Treaty of Paris was created. This treaty was ratified in 1783 and officially ended the Revolutionary War. This granted the 13 colonies independence and the ability to spread further westward, leading to Manifest Destiny and the Mexican-American War in the coming decades. The United States' newfound independence left some Americans questioning what being American really meant, especially with slavery still being very common and voting rights being hard to acquire due to gender, racial, and economic factors. The American Revolution is credited with inspiring revolutions in other nations as well, such as the French and Haitian revolutions. It also left many questioning the role that this small, new country would play in the global landscape.